en las que estamos viviendo en este momento de transición, que es cómo construir esperanza desde la cultura del cuidado. Voy a dar una breve introducción del doctor.
Then we can start. Can you see
transcripción en vivo? If they transcription in English, but that will help to listen to you better.
Okay, no, excellent.
Entonces,
So,
pueden poner transcripción en vivo.
There will be some further and deeper and so forth, but initially just kind of a broad, basic story that's very an autobiography in a certain sense. I have good memories of your university, Stella. So in 2010, Professor Veronica Montes de Ocha invited us for the centenary celebrations of the university. I have to say, it was a bit of a struggle to get there because I was detained as an African at the Houston airport, your countrymen, and we had good bonding in that detention center. But anyhow, so eventually I got, to Mexico City, and it was such an amazing experience. I would like to share with you some reflections on South Africa as a society in transition towards hope, with hope, through care and the common good. So as you will see in my designation, I've got a joint appointment with the University of Oxford. And one Sunday, my wife and I attended a service at the congregation where we are members when I am in Oxford. We are in Oxford. So, and that's the University Church of St. Mary the Virgin. That's right behind these university buildings, right at the back. So the photo you see. And oh my goodness, that university church had her fair share of drama over the centuries. So that was the site in 1555 where the trial of the Oxford martyrs happened, when Bishops Latimer, Ridley, and Archbishop Cranmer were tried for heresy. And they were subsequently burned on the stake. So anyhow, that day when we attended, a student did a very touching prayer for peace in the conflict-ridden regions of the world. She mentioned Syria, she mentioned Israel, she mentioned Palestine, and I'm sure if I've been there this past week, and they would also have mentioned the Ukraine. Not to mention Iraq at that stage. And then, while sitting there, it once again dawned on me that South Africa is not on the list anymore. Usually when we attended any place, people thought about South Africa, prayed for South Africa, and so forth. The bloodbath that everyone expected actually never happened. What a wonderful story we still have to tell. The story of a 21st century miracle. But I have to add, a miracle based on the immense effort on many levels, particularly on the micro level. And that is where I want to focus in my reflections. But before I get into the reflections, just a quick background to contextualize my presentation, because for many, South Africa is a different world. Of course, right down south, South Africa, on this huge, diverse continent, the second largest land mass on Earth. So it's a population of around 60 million people. So the population is important, that you understand the population structure. So you can see around 80% of the population are Black Africans. And then these small minorities, the white, so-called white population, 10% approximately, then the Indian population, Asian population, 2.5, and then kind of a mixed race population, almost 9%. So, because I mentioned this specifically because all the tensions are around this structure. So, and of course, within the South African context, it's about race. So, just a quick overview of history. And my goodness, this is controversial to do it like this, because I'm not even scratching the surface. But around 1652, and I don't even now consider pre-colonial history, around 1552, the East Indian Company arrived, and you know, it was treated, the Cape was treated like a business. It was not colonized as such. And then the real colonizers came, the British, the English settlers, 1820 around. And then the descendants of the Dutch kind of moved to the north in 1838 because they didn't want to live under British authority. And then in 1899 to 1903, oh my goodness, they found the richest gold in Johannesburg, exactly where I'm sitting now. So, and the British then invaded this northern part of the country, and it was the Anglo-South African War. And that had immense impact on the Afrikaner, descendants of Dutch, German, and so forth migrants. Immense, because they were concentration camps and so forth. So 1910, the Union, British Union, 1948, National Party come in power, and apartheid started. What is apartheid? It's, in short, segregation. Segregation between the races, and you can imagine the minority of white people were in power, and the majority of people didn't even have voting rights and so forth. So 61 out of the Commonwealth, and then in 76, something that touched me immensely is the Soweto uprising, where there was this spontaneous new movement, revolutionary movement, where young students just couldn't take it anymore, and they rose up against the government. And then, of course, this pressure built and built and built also internationally. And in 1990, the release of President Mandela, the then later to be President Mandela, 1991, the National Peace Accord, and I'll focus a bit on that. And in 1994, the first democratic elections and back into the Commonwealth. So it's a long history of colonialism, oppression, segregation, apartheid, tension between races. So, and there you see the 4 presidents since 1994, Mandela, Mbeki, Zuma, and currently Ramaphosa. So this history has all the makings of a Greek tragedy, but then also as well one of miracles and hope. In classic Greek tragedy, the actors are both subjects of the events that take place and pawns on a chessboard. They are free to act and yet again not free to really do so. My natural inclination as an academic would have been to now lecture, on sustainable peace, the ethics of care, and so forth. We could have spent hours dissecting the process that happened in South Africa, which includes a continuing and simultaneous top-down, and here you see the top people, President de Klerk, transitional president, last president of the apartheid state, and the then to become President Mandela. So we could have spoken hours on the continuous and simultaneous top-down and bottom-up approach over an extended period of time that was followed in South Africa. That is fascinating. This story is conversely more than often told from the perspective of the top-down, the perspective of the formal political parties and functioning on the macro level. I don't want to do that today. So I would like to rather focus on the grassroots participation in this process that ended up in this miracle. So the grassroots participation was formally built into the peace process in South Africa through the National Peace Accord. So let me tell you how that happened. So in November, and that's fascinating, in November 1990, and remember, South Africa was now on the verge of a bloodbath. So in November 1990, a national conference involving all but 2 Christian religious groups marked a historic moment towards reconciliation. The Dutch Reformed Church confessed its guilt. So, and remember now, these churches were also segregated. So the Dutch Reformed Church was the church of white Afrikaners. So they confessed their guilt and acknowledged their role in apartheid, to maintain the system. And moved by this confession of these hardliners, delegates then formulated a declaration denouncing apartheid segregation, calling for a democratic constitution and more equitable distribution of wealth. They urged the churches to condemn all forms of violence and decided to convene a peace conference. And very much in the lead was Archbishop Tutu, and he passed away just last year. Around the same time as the church initiative, a group of progressive business leaders from a number of large corporations formed the consultative business movement to develop an informed response to the deteriorating situation in South Africa. And after a series of discrete meetings with key leaders, the consultative business movement gained credibility as a potential facilitator in both the National Peace Accord and the constitutional negotiations. So after a series of meetings and so forth, an agreement was reached for a National Peace Accord. And I could have spent hours telling you how it worked, the national structures, and then the local structures, and so forth. And this was supposed to facilitate violence prevention and to address key themes. So in each region, there was a number of local peace committees. And there were around 260 of these local peace committees across the countries. And I happened to become one of the chairpersons of these local peace committees. And their function was to promote trust and reconciliation at the grassroots level, mediate conflicts, facilitate agreements on the operation of local public political events, promote compliance with the agreements reached, and liaise with the local police and judiciary, and implement national and regional initiatives. In many areas, they became involved in coordinating 15,000 trained peace monitors, drawn from all sectors from society, young unemployed people, and so forth. The volunteer local peace committee members were trained in dispute resolution, meeting facilitation, and negotiating skills, and were compensated for out-of-pocket expenses. In some areas, the local peace committees work closely with reconstruction and development committees to address economic development in their community. I could have spent hours, on this. But then I thought, let me rather share with you a more personal journey. I want to share with you the story or stories that happened around these two people. This is a story situated between Mimi on my left, the older woman, and Pretty on my right. So this is the cliffhanger. So let me proceed. So these are two quite important characters. So in short, I'm a 9th generation South African, or African, so to speak. And I was born in 1962, smack bang within apartheid. Incidentally, I just became 60 yesterday. I knew nothing else apart from apartheid. In our house, we grew up with stories about Mimi, the lady on the left. And Mimi Kurtse was the first Afrikaner soprano to achieve international acclaim in Vienna. She was based in Austria, Vienna, where in 1966 she was awarded the title of Kammersängerin. Oh my goodness. And we were so proud of Mimi. We called her our Mimi, unsere Mimi, ons Mimi. It is only with hindsight that I realized how Mimi was abused by the system, by the nationalist government. She became a token of their ideology. They used her achievements in Europe to further the ideology of the superiority of the Afrikaner, of white people. Unsere Mimi, an expression of hubris and of exclusivity. It is so interesting how the Afrikaners suffered under the British, and then they became the next abuser. This is quite important because that made a huge impact on my life, this idea, when I realized that. So in 1976, I referred to the Soweto uprising. Of course, my mother sensitized us that this is not a sustainable policy, what we are experiencing. For some reason, she had a sense. So, and especially when 1976 happened, and these children were just my same age, and I couldn't understand what is going on. And then I also realized we are all waiting for something to happen. And it was so beautifully explored by Vincent Crapanzano, distinguished professor of comparative literature and anthropology at CUNY. He explored the whole idea of waiting. We all somehow waited for something. We waited. Some waited for a catastrophe, others for a savior of some kind, some for a creative plan, others for the right moment, some for a miracle, and others wait for a good fight. So off I went to university, and there I happened to meet Archbishop Tutu. And that made an everlasting impression on me. It actually changed my life, my paradigm. It gave me a new vocabulary, a new template to work from. He said, "Dear gentlemen," we were only a group of men, "given what your ancestors experienced under the English or the British oppression," you remember that Anglo-Boer War? "You, as young Afrikaners, should actually know better. How can the abused now be the abuser? You should stop it." And of course, as I mentioned, he referred to the Anglo-South African War, where 26,000 women and children were killed in concentration camps by the British, and they were impoverished and downtrodden. And this was the most crucial element in the history of the Afrikaner, the matrix out of which the kind of people we became was born. So eventually other leaders had an influence on me. Professor Haynes, he was later murdered, and so forth. And I got engrossed in the vocabulary of reconciliation and to make a change. The person on the top right, Professor Nico Smit, also had an immense impact on me, in the sense that he started organizing. Remember, everything was segregated. If you go to the bioscope, it's a white bioscope. If you go to church, it's a white church and a black church and so forth. We never mixed. It was kind of parallel lives. And so he started to organize these dinners where he invited white students, black students, and so forth. We went on outings where we went as a mixed group to the bioscope and so forth to see a film. Immense impact on my life. So what departure points, to make a long story short? In 1992, as I mentioned, I became chair of one of the local peace committees. And then all these things kicked in. And I just thought, let's take small steps towards a big idea. The idea of reconciliation and so forth, to get to know each other. Let's take small steps to let people discover each other, their common humaneness, through Ubuntu. So Ubuntu is a Nguni word, Xhosa, Zulu, and Ndebele. We've got, just for interest's sake, 11 official languages in South Africa. So Ubuntu is in one of those families. Ubuntu means, and that's the philosophy we work with, I am who I am because of who you are. Or simpler said, I am because we are. I am because we are. So the greatest hope for peace still lies in the thousands of grassroots meetings between members and supporters of rival political organizations, which were held under the auspices of the Peace Accord. If the birth of the new South Africa is a little more peaceful than the last few bloody years, we will have largely a strengthened peace accord to thank. So what happened? On a weekly basis, these local peace committees gathered across the country. We ate together, we shouted at each other, we cried together, we listened to each other somehow. And so apart from the formal meetings, I then also strived, and it directly links to the ethics of care conceptualizations. I strive to an aesthetic of the ordinary, where we discovered each other through ordinary events, through meals, through singing together in a choir, and so forth, and so forth. So part of the peace structures were also, of course, developmental issues. So, and that's hugely important. It's not only about, these care issues and so, about these kind of meals and very personal issues. But we also had to get involved into justice. It's not only about reconciliation, but also about justice. Can't talk reconciliation if people's basic needs are not satisfied. And so we became involved in all kinds of community developmental projects. We as a community started building a community health center. Very, very specific and concrete. A human-centered approach attempts to allow individuals to participate actively and interactively in different programs and processes in order to stimulate sustainable development. Traditional values like a peaceful communal living together of people, justice, respect, can easily be used as a basic point of departure for a people-centered approach. Interventions in this regard should be interpreted very inclusively. So this is the clinic. So we started a rehabilitation unit, occupational therapy, physiotherapy. So what happens? You know, white privileged students will do their internships at these clinics and build relationships. The University of Pretoria. We started the Iaetu Social Service Center, broadly looking at childcare, HIV/AIDS counseling, care for older persons, HALT Elder Abuse Line, Alcohol and Drug Help Center, Departments of Social Services, Social Security, Home Affairs. So we brought the whole idea of reconciliation into these systemic structural issues. We've built this amazing center for intergenerational center for older persons. Mtumkulu, it means big tree. So point is, and I've seen Joan Tronto here. Point is, you know, it's about, in the words of Fisher and Tronto, anything that can be done to maintain, continue, and repair our world so that we can live in it as well as possible. It includes our bodies. It includes house building. It includes clinic building. It includes meals. It includes choir singing. And then the miraculous day happened. 27 April, it's around the corner, that we'll celebrate that again, 1994. So you see all these queues snaking to cast their first vote. And the peace committees were quite involved in all of this. And behind these queues were all these efforts of meals and singing and clinics and so forth. So what an amazing day this was. The new South Africa was born. So, and we became part of a continent that we lived on for so long, but actually never experienced. So from September 1994, soon after the elections, the new government then sadly started closing down the peace structures without stating its reasons. This decision was possibly taken, you know, in view that the new constitution provided democratic mechanisms at all levels that supplanted the need for the National Peace Accord structures. How wrong they were. Because, you know, everything was just moved to the macro systemic level. But even though the peace structures were closed down, you know, many of these activities had a momentum of their own, and the choir grew by the day. So with young people from disadvantaged communities joining. Among them, Pretty Yende on the left, the other lady I referred to, and given Nkosi. So let me focus in on Pretty. So Pretty Yende, you know, actually from a very disadvantaged community, started singing in this choir. And actually in a church. And that was also controversial. You can think now, no? These white segregated churches, and suddenly we bring in a black choir. And initially, people kept their distance, but we know people, you know, if something is beautiful and something aesthetically touches your heart, you can't stay quiet about it. So eventually people reached out to the choir members and so forth. Pretty was one of these members. And beautiful relations were built. And then they got to know that Pretty is this hugely talented soprano. And people reached out to her and given, you know, donated money, you know, for them to get vocal training and so forth. Long story short, Pretty then won the Belvedere competition in Vienna. And as we speak, she is the most famous soprano in South Africa and also internationally. Here, she's actually with one of your very famous tenors, Javier Camarena. So, and they did an amazing production of La Fille du Regiment in the Met. So you know, this girl from a disadvantaged community, through the care and the involvement of regular people, you know, churchgoers and so forth, her life totally changed. So where are we at the moment in 2022? Sadly, still stuck in poverty, unemployment, exacerbated by age. You know, singularly, poverty and inequality determine South Africans' lives. So half of the total population surviving on less than 20, on £2 a day. Millions of South Africans remain entrapped in poverty. Currently 10 million children, 55% live below the ultra poverty line. And so forth, and so forth. You know, I can go on and on. Our unemployment rate is extremely high. It's far north of 30%. So we are stuck currently in crime and corruption. We cry for our country. So does this mean that everything was in vain? And that Archbishop Tutu's so-called Rainbow Nation is just an over-sentimentalized view of the reality of life in South Africa? I want to shout out, no, no, no. The rainbow is always closely related to the storm. There are no rainbows without tension and storm. There are no rainbows where there are no storms. Against the background of immense tension, more often than less, the clear actions of compassion and forgiveness and reconstruction break through each and every time in rainbow colors. a peace that is supposed to become a shared culture thanks to a gradual social diffusion, starting with a select few who are immediately, connected to it. So, and amidst it all, if you want to experience the art of care and the art of peace, please experience it through one of the daughters of South Africa, our pretty. So, and this time, not in an exclusive sense, a sense of hubris, but really inclusive. I look at Ukraine. I look at Syria. I look at Mozambique, at the Congo. And then, in the words of Archbishop Tutu, I think, when we look around us at some of the conflict areas of the world, it becomes increasingly clear that there's not much of a future for them without forgiveness, without reconciliation. And we in South Africa are blessed. And quite improbably, we as South Africans have become a beacon of hope to others locked in deadly conflict, that peace that is just is possible. And if it could happen in South Africa, and although we have a long, long way to go, then it can certainly happen anywhere else. We can change the world and make it a better place through the ordinary. It is in our hands to make a difference. So in the meantime, all we can do is, in Joan's words, maintain, continue, and repair our world so that we can live it in it as well as possible. That includes everything. So I'm going to try to play this, Estella, a little video that my university is involved. And interestingly, my university, Northwest University, has as its vision and mission statement an ethics of care. So, and that's why we have fascinating community engagement programs. If you don't hear well, probably those with headphones will hear better. So just look at the imagery, it's 5 minutes, and you get a sense of what we are dealing with when I mention that it's not only about, the vocabulary, reconciliation, forgiveness, and so forth, but also about justice, and that is so incredibly needed.
Thank you, Jaco.
What needs to be done? Yeah. attention at all. Recently, there is video. Intergenerational solidarity. Our generation is very important in the creation of a number of discourses. So it's still of the use of 1,500 of all the people in Sub-Saharan Africa involved in the long-term care economy may not be possible through them on the system and support the undergoing of the older but may also give people of future job and exploration to a career trajectory. Furthermore, we lead in the interface of care and technology for all generations to develop a groundbreaking either many countries have elected data for data policy design, monitoring, and evaluation of the informal economy, but there's limited initiatives on how they can translate to boosted growth and to achieve the goal of actual work. This is wonderful working people are against working together in the same way. What we really need is to review very important that we all know about the place in achieving the outcome that we should have, which is the Article 1 budgets.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jaco. We were not able to listen to the video, so I want to ask you if you can send it to me later, so I can just share it with everybody, because the images are really very, very beautiful and interesting, but we would love to listen to it.
Sure.
And we are very, very thankful. I think we have many questions. Lu, te paso la palabra.
Claro, muchísimas gracias a todos y todas por estar en esta conferencia. Hoy no tenemos sesión cerrada de trabajo como tal, este va a ser nuestro espacio de preguntas, respuestas, reflexiones, comentarios. Invitamos a quienes están en la sesión de Zoom, pero también a quienes nos están siguiendo en la transmisión por la plataforma de YouTube, a hacer sus preguntas. Pueden utilizar el chat de ambas plataformas, pueden solicitar la palabra y también con gusto se la pasamos. No se preocupen si son en español o en inglés, desde el equipo vamos a traducirlas en caso de ser necesario, pero por favor siéntanse libres de tomar la palabra. Si alguien quisiera hacer alguna pregunta, comentario, reflexión, pueden ir solicitando la palabra. Mientras, tenemos también ya algunas preguntas que tomó nota nuestra compañera Estela. Estela, te paso la palabra.
Sí, muchas gracias. No sé si alguien de aquí de los colegas tenga alguna pregunta también. Bueno, además de que creo, there's a birthday greeting for you, Jaco, in the YouTube chat. So happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Really, thank you for being with us today. While I was listening to you, bueno, Arela, I will do the question in Spanish, and after that I will ask it to you. Mientras escuchaba a Jaco esta mañana, evidentemente pensaba mucho en lo que vivimos en nuestro país actualmente, y pensaba sobre todo en esta idea de los tejidos sociales rotos en una sociedad tan desigual y con la presencia de un régimen basado en los privilegios, en la desigualdad, en la segregación. A mí me gustaría preguntarle a Jaco, que él nos dice que sí ha valido la pena todo lo que se ha vivido después de esta pacificación y de estos intentos por construir la paz, pero me gustaría si él nos pudiera hablar un poco de cuáles son las tensiones que permanecen vivas en esa sociedad y cuáles son los retos, por un lado, y también cómo construir diálogo y la posibilidad de ver al otro como un otro. Él nos hablaba de este concepto de Ubuntu, que creo que significa esta necesidad de construirnos como comunidad, pero querría preguntarle si él pudiera hablar un poquito más y voy a tratar de hacerlo en inglés a ver si lo logro. Jaco, I was telling my friends and my colleagues and the people that are here with us today that while I was listening to you, I thought about our country, about Mexico. I mean, there are many differences between South Africa and Mexico and our history, but there are also some similitudes, some things that are similar in many ways. I am thinking very precisely about polarization, as you may know, and I think that's not a Mexican problem only, but in our world, polarization and hate are growing as something that we are breathing all over the world. And in our society, this polarization is one of I perceive it as one of the most preoccupying themes in our society. So I would like to ask you, how did you do to stop these feelings of hate and between people who have been privileged in one way and other people which have been oppressed by centuries? And do you think if that is possible, and how can you do that people see each other as another person and not as the other?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, this is $1 million question. So I actually, while we were talking, I thought, oh my goodness, did it stop in South Africa? Because we experience a new wave of polarization. Young unemployed people. Remember, this is above 35% of people in South Africa are unemployed. If you think young people, and specifically Black young people, it goes up to 60%. So many of these young people are fed up with the idea of talk of reconciliation and forgiveness and so forth. Actually, we often have weeks on our campus where we specifically put racial issues and issues of inequality on the table. So, and these younger students will say, we're tired of talking, and all these words. So we now want justice before reconciliation and negotiation and so forth. So in a certain sense, I have to backtrack a bit. We still have a long way to go, but we came a very long way. So, and oh my goodness, Estela, I would say the only way, because that's what we've proven, the only way we can do it is through these kind of top-down, bottom-up, simultaneous initiatives. And it should be organized, but within the structure also spontaneous. the sad thing is, as I mentioned, the South African government closed down this amazing structure they had. My colleague at Oxford, Professor Liz, is busy working on a book on the peace structures. And for the first time, we'll have, a substantial volume on how these peace structures and so forth, the bottom-up aspect of it is all put together. So Liz Carmichael, it will be published soon. So I think there you will find some kind of a structure. Do I have an ultimate answer? No. So it's, I think it's systemic, but also then on the micro level, spontaneous and so forth. So, point is, it should be an effort and organized. It should be, it will not just happen. So, and as Bishop Tutu said, if it could have happened in South Africa, it can happen, anywhere else. I just absolutely believe in it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Jaco. I think there is another question.
Sí, tenemos una pregunta de Juan, que nos está siguiendo desde YouTube. Él pregunta cuáles serían las motivaciones para reintegrar a personas que hayan estado involucradas con el crimen organizado. Dear Professor Hoffman, there's a question in YouTube platform, and it's from John, and he asked, what's the motivation to reintegrate people drawn into organized crime?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yes, if you want, I can put in the chat the question. It's over there. What's the motivation to reintegrate people drawn into organized crime?
What is the motivation to reintegrate people drawn into?
It's from John.
Yes. Yeah. So, my spontaneous reaction will be, is it possible to reintegrate many of these people, these persons? So, because it's they're kind of stuck in a kind of a culture in a certain sense. But motivation, of course, we have to give people a reason to value their lives. So, and many younger people are drawn into crime because they are they just lost any hope to get any sustenance, within the organized system. So I guess if you give people reason to value their lives and opportunities, and that relates a bit to the little video I've shown around the whole idea of decent work for people to be able to live with dignity and so forth. So if I have to put a motivation out there, why integrating people, I think it's quite difficult. But I honestly think, it is our it should be our aim, to work towards a better society and give people reason to value their existence, as well as reason to value the existence of others around them. So that will be my really off-the-cuff answer.
Thank you so much. Benjamín nos pide la palabra. Adelante, Benjamín.
Gracias. Dr. Hoffman, well, congratulations. It was a great
Thank you.
presentation. And I think that Mandela is really the most important leader of the 20th century and beyond. But I would like to ask you about your work on the ethics of care and with the growing of the baby boomers, we are now facing, on one hand, a tsunami of aging and care. And in your wonderful book that was published a couple of years ago, you draw on feminism ideas as a critique of the neo-Kantian ethics. So this view of ethics of care, and I would add aging, for a country that is struggling with economics like Mexico or South Africa, how has the feminist critique enlightened a path forward? I mean, I live in Boston, and the kind of emphasis that the health system puts on keeping your life until the last minute is very different from what Europe or Mexico or other countries have, that really are more focused on quality on life and not on extending life as an independent value. But you are the authority. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, interestingly, Africa is the youngest region in the world. And so whenever we think of older persons within the youngest region of the world, we think in relational terms. And I think that
Creo que perdimos la conexión con el profesor Hoffman.
Le voy a mandar un mensajito.
Claro, por favor, nos quedamos conectados unos minutitos hasta que...
A mí me gustaría preguntarle también ahora, mientras le escribo, algo sobre la necesidad de perdonar, pero voy a escribir un mensajito.
Sí.
Pero en lo que se conecta, puedo agrandar un poco.
Claro que sí. Adelante, Benjamín.
Doctora Rosselló, precisamente Desmond Tutu, y puede comentarlo él mucho mejor, por supuesto, es sí, la necesidad de perdonar, pero no la necesidad de olvidar. No podemos perdonar si olvidamos.
Sí, sin duda. Ya me está escribiendo ahora el doctor.
hello, do you hear me now? Yeah. Good.
You are back. You are back.
Yeah, sorry, I was kicked off. So, I think, you know, the relational aspect and specifically the intergenerational aspect will be of huge importance, you know, within the African context. So, and then the whole idea of, you know, the dignity in care. For example, we've got this huge HIV/AIDS issue that now with COVID is crowded out a bit, but millions of older persons, older women, caring for their grandchildren. and the huge contribution that these older women are making, and often not acknowledged. So within our system, or context, and that's the other thing of the ethics of care, it's situational. So not kind of general principles only, but situational, careful understanding of the relationships within bigger structures and on the micro level. So, but in short, I would say what is important to me will be the relational aspects within an ethics of care specifically.
Thank you so much. Si alguien más quiere levantar, por favor, la mano, si tiene algún comentario, seguimos recibiendo preguntas, pueden usar el chat o escribirnos a cualquiera de las personas organizadoras. Tenemos una pregunta específica relacionada sobre cuál ha sido el papel de las mujeres en este proceso de reconciliación en el caso que hoy nos presenta el doctor Hoffman. Professor Hoffman, what has been the role of women in the reconciliation process? If you can talk more about that.
Oh my goodness, huge. You know, there's always this this dichotomy in a certain sense. On the one hand, the position of women in Africa, that's not always appreciated. Female violence and so forth. On the other hand, within the whole process of the struggle towards the end of apartheid and reconciliation, the huge role women played. No, we can't underestimate that. So, and especially older women. You know, it's these older women raising these families. So we are still struggling to understand the role of men, you know, within families, and it's actually quite a crisis. Where are the fathers? Where are the grandfathers? And so forth. And then each and every time older women will come to the fore and they will pull the wagon and take responsibility. For example, I think next to Brazil, we the country in the developing world with one of the largest social protection networks. Of course, it is relative and quite small, but it's extensive and wide in scope. So, and in our research, we found that it's older women that really makes all the difference. They use their grants, they get an old age grant from 60 on, and these grants are transferred down through the generations. So they keep families out of, you know, utmost poverty. So, of course, still struggling, but they neglect themselves. And the research I remember is that around 80% of these older women are transferring these grants down the generations without, you know, keeping anything to themselves. So what a huge, huge role women play in the reconstruction also and the development of South Africa. It's the, you know, we're still in that colonial system where children can't go to school if they don't have a school uniform. And I know so many of these older women that will give their all to provide their grandchildren with a school uniform, to keep them going and to support them. So yes, women, absolutely invaluable. Yeah, our crisis is men. So, yeah.
Thank you. Tenemos una mano levantada. Por favor, Javier, adelante.
Yeah, thanks for all the information. I hope I can do the question. And in this idea of the reconciliation, I can't stop to think in Marikana and the movement of Rhodes Must Fall of the students. So I don't know, it seems that there is a failure in this reconciliation process. I hope that you can profundize in this.
Yeah. No, Javier, thank you very much for that critique. And I think it's a hugely important critique. And that's why when Estela mentioned this polarization and so forth, and I then mentioned that, oh my goodness, we are still struggling with it. So, and it's specifically a younger generation. And somehow the reconciliation template, the vocabulary of the statesman and his prophet, and I mean President Mandela and Bishop Tutu, that vocabulary doesn't make an impact on them. They feel betrayed by this whole negotiation process, this whole reconciliation process. And as I said, the mantra is justice before negotiation. So absolutely. Of course, there's a lot of opportunistic political involvement in all of this. So, that we can't deny, especially from populist political parties. But the fact is, our younger generations are frustrated. And is that the answer? So whose justice and what justice, and then negotiation? I guess, it's not a one or the other, but the one and the other. Interestingly, I had colleagues that was involved, in the university management, and that I had to negotiate with these students, and their difficulty, because they were part of the struggle towards a democratic South Africa, and suddenly they were now in the position of management and had to negotiate with these students, and they just couldn't make an impact. And the absolute mental agony these previous struggle activists experienced, negotiating with these young people. So yes, I think, what shall I answer you? This is something we have to deal with. So on a day-to-day basis, point is, do you ever, achieve an ideal situation? I guess no. We have to deal with it in a very pragmatic, practical way, day by day. So yeah.
Thank you. No sé si alguien más gusta tomar la palabra. Ya vamos terminando esta sesión, esta conferencia. Le voy a dar la palabra a Estela. Adelante, Estela.
Sí, I have a last question for you, Jaco. We could continue talking about this for hours. We hope this is the first of many, many conversations. But my last question, and I will make it in Spanish first so the audience can listen to it, es ¿cuál sería realmente la importancia de pedir un perdón histórico por toda la desigualdad y por las injusticias que ha habido a lo largo del tiempo en una sociedad como la sudafricana, y cómo se construye realmente el perdón cotidiana, de manera cotidiana, real, significativa, para poder reparar los tejidos sociales rotos a lo largo del tiempo? Esa sería mi pregunta. Voy a tratar de hacerla en inglés. And the question, Jaco, is it necessary to ask for historical forgiveness? And what is the real meaning of forgiving in daily life? What is the importance of forgiving as a new cultural way of listening to the other and being with the other? How to make it real, significant, and not only a political discourse? I mean, I'm talking about forgiveness because you mentioned forgiveness in many times. And also Benjamin said we have to forgive, but without forgetting, which is another thing too.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Of course, there's individual kind of forgiveness on a that relational level. So, but I feel it's very important to also take part in a collective forgiveness. And I mentioned that, in my small reflections, that the ball got rolling, within the South African context, when the Dutch Reformed Church that supported the Nationalist Party, that gave them moral authority. So when they stood up as a collective, as a church, and said, we can't go on like this, and we look at people and we ask for forgiveness. Of course, did everybody participate and did everybody follow in the church? No, of course not. So there was an official, they made an official statement, and that got the ball rolling. Other churches got involved, and the whole religious community got involved, and eventually also big business got involved. And that momentum I find quite amazing. So the vocabulary of the statesman and his prophet, of course, that same vocabulary is also now abused. Some of the corrupt politicians will argue, okay, I made a mistake. So, if I could have forgiven the apartheid perpetrators, why can't I now be forgiven? So, that template, that vocabulary of reconciliation and so forth is also abused. So quite controversial, I think. But I guess on a collective basis, so there is a dynamic. It creates a new dynamic. It creates a new way of talking to each other and so forth. If there is a point of a collective forgiveness. Yeah. So, I guess I always find it interesting where religion is a divisive factor, in so many countries. For example, I guess, the Palestine-Israel scenario. So in South Africa, it was, it created solidarity. Somehow we were all kind of cognizant of the basic vocabulary at that point of the statesman and his prophet. So Mandela and Tutu. Whether it's the same now, I don't know. And that's something I struggle with. Say we start with a new round of peace structures. Given and Javier referred to that, given the new generations, the new situation, and so forth, will we have the same effect and impact? Mm-hmm. That I don't know. What I'm sure of is that dynamic, that principle of top-down, bottom-up, simultaneous and concurrently, that is a hugely important principle. But how to specifically organize it, I don't know how it was done 2 decades, 3 decades ago will exactly, work the same. And I guess we'll have to gauge the context. Yeah.
And thank you so much, Jaco. And just another point, you talked about how to stop the idea of making the people who were abused now becoming the abusers, like how to stop this kind of historic revenge, no? Like now it's our turn and we can abuse as we were abused before, and that's something that is very, very interesting, and something that I think we have to look very with much attention to stop that.
Oh my goodness, that intergenerational transfer of revenge and that particular vocabulary. We see it in the Middle East. We probably will see it now in Ukraine and Russia and so forth. So yes, somewhere, we need to break that vicious circle. So, and I guess, that made an impact on my personal life when Archbishop Tutu looked me in my eyes and said that. So, I always think if it can be done, within the South African situation, because the hate between the Afrikaner and the British was huge, and that was in 1903. So my grandmother still experienced, some of that. And then for the next 2 generations to break, that dynamic, that is an effort. And that is where I think the role of a collective forgiveness, a statement, leadership, and so forth is so important.
Thank you very much, Jaco. No sé,
Thank
Luz,
you.
si hay otra pregunta.
Por el momento no tenemos más preguntas.
Sí,
Tengo una
hay
mano
una de Frida.
levantada.
Hay una de
Sí,
Frida.
tengo una mano levantada. Le doy la palabra a nuestra colega Frida Romero. Adelante, Frida.
Hola, gracias. Bueno, trataré de hacer la pregunta directo en inglés.
Gracias, Frida.
A ver. Thank you, Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Frida.
I was curious about the role of health to act as a peace builder or a reconciler, but taking into account the complex and often problematic endeavor that providing healthcare is, because it can also be one more social segregator, right? Or it has unintended consequences in social terms. So, because thinking about biomedicine in a critical way, at the end, biomedicine has been or designed for certain specific groups, and it's historical. A lot of other groups has been excluded of that biomedicine services, or at least this kind of healthcare services has ambiguous meanings. And I think in the South African context, I suppose it's complex because of the other kinds of health services that are not biomedicine necessarily. So I was just curious about this health role of health and your experience about that as a peace builder. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Frida. What a really deep, wonderful question. I wish we could spend some more time thinking about that. But Benjamin will appreciate that when first we worked with older persons, within that particular community. And then we realized, we can't follow that Western model of residential care and institutionalization and what, that's out. So if we establish, a center for older persons, a kind of a daycare center and so forth, and some housing, we also have to link that and complement that with primary health care facilities, in that area, kind of a holistic approach. So it was a bit of a pragmatic approach, which worked quite well and served, the whole community and also the intergenerational aspect of it. So, so it's not only older people being serviced by the community, but by the primary healthcare center and so forth, but the whole of the community. So in that sense, it served a wonderful role regarding social solidarity and intergenerational solidarity and generational solidarity and so forth. Interestingly, Frida, you mentioned traditional and alternative care or healthcare, and so at that facility, the Iyetu facility, there was also offices for traditional healers. So in the South African context, traditional medicine is very much part of the broader system. Of course, there's still some resistance from certain quarters, but it's very much part of it. I'm busy. I'm now part. I'm going to Cape Town tomorrow as part of an advisory committee on dementia in Africa. We don't even have a word for dementia in most indigenous languages. So, and on that advisory committee is also traditional healers and so forth. So, yeah, so Frida, of course, controversial, Western medicine, there's a huge anti-vax movement also in South Africa, for example, because it's this westernized pharma, big pharma kind of setup. I know around the HIV/AIDS, antiretrovirals, also the same resistance initially. Johnny Steinberg wrote a beautiful book specifically on this, the 3-letter plague, on this resistance against Western medical interventions and so forth. So, but I think, our initial aim to integrate older persons within the community and for them to stay in the community as long as possible, that worked quite well. Those facilities we've built, some housing facilities, also included rooms for their grandchildren, so that the intergenerational, multi-generational family setup could be maintained and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Frida, for your interesting question. No sé si alguien más, tenemos todavía unos minutos, si no vamos cerrando esta conferencia magistral del doctor Hoffman. Si no veo ninguna otra mano levantada, tampoco tenemos preguntas en YouTube pendientes. No sé si a usted le gusta dar un saludo final y luego yo regreso para recordarles las sesiones que vienen. Tienes el micrófono apagado, Estela.
Sí, ya. Muchas gracias. Gracias, querida Lu. Solamente agradecer muchísimo a todos los que han estado esta mañana aquí con nosotros. Realmente creo que ha sido un placer viajar a otras latitudes, poder hablar de estos temas que sin duda nos hacen pensar en nuestras propias realidades desde el sur. Hay muchísimo que tenemos todavía que debatir, que pensar, que construir juntos. Gracias por estar aquí esta mañana. Dear Jaco, thank you so much for being with us this morning. It has been a pleasure and an honor, and you have made us think in so many questions, not only about South Africa and the world, but also about our South countries like Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, South America, yeah. Where we have so many societies that are really needing about thinking for hope and reconciliation, repairing social broken tissues. So we hope to have you with us soon again and keep in touch with you. Thank you so much. And well, if you can send us your video later.
Yes, actually I found now what I should have done. So if you want to,
yes, please.
Shall we quickly do it?
And we can close with that, the session of today. Now, before you do it, just let's, Lu, ¿crees que vemos el video primero y después dices los mensajes?
Claro que sí.
Perfecto. So, Jaco, we are ready. And thank you so much.
Good. All the best. You keep well. And let's end with a video.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I just need to get it moved. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh. Yeah, there it is.
There it is. And yeah.
Africa is a continent with boundless potential. What needs to be done to unleash Africa's potential and ignite a growth revolution? And how does crises, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, further affect the continent's future prospects? Approximately 10 to 12 million youths enter the African workforce annually. However, only 3 million formal jobs are created each year. According to the IMF, Africa's growth in 2020 will be slashed from 2.6% to -3% due to the impact of COVID-19.
You know, there's a whole lot of us that live here, but there's nothing that's easy for anyone. I mean, even people that even went to school, have got their degrees, even they still sitting at home, they're not working.
The freedom to choose to work is a core human activity that is essential to our being. Many Africans, however, do not have access to the benefits of working or being decently employed. Decent work is a basic but crucial step to promote the functioning of people and to harness the demographic dividend. Optentia at Northwest University recently completed a research project on unemployment with propositions on how people without employment can help themselves to get into the job market. But helping those without decent jobs to build their resilience and efficacy is only one part of assisting African countries to promote inclusive growth. Bringing governments, employers, and future employers nearer to the potential employees is equally important to create capabilities. For a social economy, we also have to think in terms of those values close to Africa's core functioning: intergenerational solidarity, how generational perspectives could be incorporated in the creation of jobs. Optentia already convened a number of research policy dialogues to explore how the youth bulge could be harnessed to address the care needs of a growing population of older people in sub-Saharan Africa. A well-developed, long-term care economy may not only foster possible improvements in the quality of assistance and support received by the growing number of older adults who require care, but may also be a key source of future job and enterprise creation towards a care career trajectory. Optentia is furthermore a leader in the interface of care and technology for all generations through the development of Yabelana, a groundbreaking e-directory system. Currently, many countries have collected data for diagnosis, policy design, monitoring and evaluation of the informal economy. But there's limited initiatives on how best this evidence can be translated to address inclusive growth and to achieve the goal of actual decent work.
There's this wonderful word in Kiswahili called harambe. It means pulling together in the same direction. What we really need in Africa is renewed enthusiasm. It's very important that we all know about this and that we know our place in achieving the outcome that we wish to have, which is the Africa we want by 2063.
All the best.
Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias a todos y todas por acompañarnos en esta conferencia magistral, también en esta sesión de intercambio. Antes de irnos, les recuerdo nuestra próxima sesión para que la agenden. Va a ser el miércoles 18 de mayo. Vamos a contar con la presencia virtual de Paolo Pagliai. Él es director del Centro de Estudios sobre Paz y Memoria y miembro fundador de Redes de Paz. Vamos a seguir conversando sobre cuidados y paz. Y también estamos muy cerca de nuestra próxima conferencia magistral, el 25 de mayo, con la profesora Joan Tronto y su disertación sobre Can Democratic Caring Save Our Planet. No se lo pierdan y nos vemos por aquí. Muchísimas gracias. Hasta pronto.
Muchísimas gracias a todos. Jaco, thank you for your fascinating talk.
Thank you.
And we are very glad to have you with all of us. Thank you and have a very nice week. Bye bye.
Bye.
Por favor, no se olviden de sus textitos sobre cuidado, sobre qué significa el cuidado para cada uno de ustedes. Un parrafito, 2 parrafitos, algo que quieran escribir antes de irse a dormir. Nos será muy útil todas sus reflexiones para empezar a pensar en ese texto colectivo. And Jaco, we hope to have you with us for next sessions when you can and when you have the time. We will be very glad.
All the best. Cheers.
Bye bye. Gracias.